In the shadow of the infamous Tower of London, where the medieval walls of the city meet the sprawling docks of the East End, lies a fortress that once guarded the wealth of an empire. For over 160 years, the Royal Mint Court was the engine of British imperial power, the secure compound where gold and silver flowed in from the colonies to be struck into the coinage that graced the wheels of global commerce. Today, this historic site stands at the centre of a new, silent and pretty troubling struggle for influence, intelligence and power in the 21st century. Here's why you should be worried. The People's Republic of China, or just China, has proposed to relocate its embassy in Britain from its current cramped compound in Portland Place to a new massive 5.5-acre walled compound. It's possibly one of the most significant and contentious diplomatic infrastructure projects in modern British history. It's so massive that it's getting called a super embassy, the largest Chinese diplomatic mission in all of Europe, more than 10 times bigger than its current compound and even grander than America's current fortress in Nine Elms. But we need to briefly cover the rules of an embassy before we continue. An embassy is a foreign government's official headquarters in another country. It handles diplomacy and often runs consular services like visas and help for its citizens. Contrary to popular belief, an embassy is not actually foreign soil. A French or German embassy in London is still British territory, but it is legally inviolable. That means that UK police and officials can't enter or search it without the ambassador's permission. Diplomats inside may also have immunity from arrest or prosecution unless their governments waive it. Embassies can use protected communication, including diplomatic couriers, as well as sealed diplomatic bags that can't be opened. If a diplomatic mission abuses these protections, the UK's main tool is political: expel staff, not raid the building. Okay, so back to the Royal Mint Court. It's a site so steeped in history, leading back to the 12th century and being used as a cemetery during the Black Death, over 400 years before the founding of the United States. In 1809, the Royal Mint moved from its old premises in the Tower of London to the new purpose-built compound of the Royal Mint Court, where for the next century and a half, it was a highly secure industrial complex, surrounded by high perimeter walls, patrolled by armed guards, and designed to protect the nation's bullion reserves. So when China bought this 22,000 square meter complex in 2018 for £255 million, they effectively bought a ready-made fortress. And this comes at a really bad time for the UK. Unless you've been living under a rock, the UK has become the new punching bag of the internet. I mean, hell, even I made a video about it a year and a half ago. But there is a lot of truth behind it. The economy has never recovered from the '08 crisis, and our handling of the fallout, on top of the disaster that is Brexit, basically killed our economy for most ordinary people. In comes Keir Starmer's Labour Party, elected pretty much entirely, not because people actually wanted them in, but because they hated the Conservatives so much, who had been in power for 14 years, all the way back in 2010. The thing is, Keir Starmer didn't have much of a platform. They didn't offer much change. They just played the "we're not the Tories" card, and people kind of bought it up. And now Starmer is in a bit of a mess, trying everything to revive the economy, but again, no actual meaningful policy changes. So in a bid to boost economic ties amid a so-called reset in ties with the second biggest economy in the world, Starmer tried pushing the acceptance of the super embassy. Also that China can increase their investments in Britain, as well as allow Britain to renovate the British embassy in Beijing, which is in dire need of renovation. Starmer did so by taking the decision out of the local council's hands in October 2024 by invoking a call-in. But here's why we should be worried. In a bombshell report released in January 2026, The Telegraph exposed unredacted plans for the Chinese embassy, which they had kept hidden from the government. It included more than 200 hidden rooms, which is already really alarming, but here's where it becomes a matter of international security. A hidden chamber was uncovered in the basement, which directly faces Mansell Street. The wall keeping the chamber and the pavement underground was scheduled to be demolished and to add a window. And what was on the other side of that wall? High-capacity trunk cables that link 11 major data centers of the Docklands and Canary Wharf to the trading floors of the City of London. For those who don't know, London and the City of London are very different things. I'll keep it brief. London, or technically Greater London, is what you think when you say London. And right there in the middle is a square mile, also known as a square mile, or the City of London, which is a square mile chunk and is the main financial hub in London along with Canary Wharf, hosting finance, banking, insurance, investment banking, legal and other service giants. CGP Grey made a great video explaining the difference. But for this video, you just need to know that the city is where many of the major institutions like the Bank of England, London Stock Exchange and a bunch of giant firms are based in. And the cables that pass all the information passes along the Royal Mint Court, just over 1 meter away from the new secret underground room. It's called the London Internet Exchange, or LINX, and it is the 6th largest internet exchange point, or IXP, in the world. Financial transactions, emails, messaging, high-frequency trading, interbank clearing, securities trading, bank transfers, IP traffic for millions in the city will be intercepted. The neural network of British services and finance, which is a major disaster. Financial transaction data relied upon by banks to update withdrawals and deposits, such as ordinary people's salary packets and payments for goods bought online. And worse yet, those cables connect to the Atlantic Ocean, also known as the transatlantic cables, all the way to the United States. That means that if the Chinese are able to tap into those cables, that would risk not just any transaction or communication headed to America from London, but British and American intelligence that passes to each other via the Five Eyes Agreement. The Five Eyes relationship is between the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, and allows those countries to share intel with each other and to help each other be more secure. It's the oldest and most significant intelligence alliance, and it's kind of a big deal. But now, this placement threatens to jeopardize the intel swap between the US and UK. The Wapping telephone exchange is also located on Royal Main Street, which means a main telecom hub is also within tapping distance, surrounded on all three sides by the embassy. It's also important to mention that the chamber is to be fitted with 2 hot air extraction systems. That shows one of two things: either large-scale backup power generation or high-density computing hardware. It's probably not the former. Seeing how close these servers will be to the fiber optic cables, it's inferred that this room could act as a server farm or data processing center capable of handling insanely large volumes of intercepted data in real time. Lots of heat will be generated, therefore the extraction fans are a must. The unredacted plans also show that a tunnel is to be built connecting the main embassy building to the server chamber, which would allow engineers and objects to move back and forth without detection. Everything will be on site: utility rooms, parking, storage, lift shafts, communication ducts, plant rooms, even bathrooms and showers. The Chinese government and its agents kept the planned layout very secret, and it's clear why. Entire floors were greyed out, redacted, or sometimes simply just labelled back of house. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner did demand an explanation for these redactions in August 2025, but the Chinese response was vague, citing standard diplomatic and security procedures. Bear in mind that once the Chinese embassy is handed over, that's it. British police can't really enter, which means that everything that happens inside will be a complete mystery to us. And since the plans also conceal bathrooms, flats, showers, hidden tunnels, and even a massive underground car park, it could basically mean that officials are planning on being in that facility for days or even weeks at a time. This is a facility designed with intel collection and self-sustenance as the goal. Shadow Security Minister Alicia Kearns described the site as a potential launchpad for economic warfare, at the heart of the central nervous system. Now, this all rests on the technical feasibility of tapping fiber optic cables. A common misconception is that tapping a fiber optic cable requires cutting it, which would immediately interrupt the signal and alert the network operator. However, non-intrusive tapping methods are well established in signals intelligence and, most importantly, are difficult to detect. Methods that the Chinese could use are macrobending and evanescent wave coupling. Side note, if you found this video interesting, a subscribe would be helpful. As Professor Alan Woodward, who is a security expert from the University of Surrey, says, China won't say what the basement is for. That can hide a multitude of sins. If they wanted to tap the cables, they wouldn't need to go very far. You wouldn't know what was happening down there. He also labelled the demolition of the basement wall as a red flag. And this wouldn't be the first time this happened. As Professor Woodward noted, there's a long history of cable tapping by East and West alike. Anyone who can do it has done it. Espionage isn't just about state secrets. Economic intelligence is central to the mission of foreign intelligence services. Operation Ivy Bells by the US Navy from the 70s to the 80s documented Soviet cable tapping in the Sea of Okhotsk. It ran for around 13 years in the 70s before discovery. It's not hard to imagine this happening. Things between the UK and China have been icy for some time. The golden era of Sino-British relations came in 2015, with Prime Minister David Cameron visiting Beijing in 2015, and Xi Jinping doing the same in London the same year. £30 billion in trade deals were announced. Huawei was cautiously allowed in to set up 5G networks, and investment flowed in to help with the post-2008 recovery. However, things began to slip in the late 2010s, as the UK supported fleeing Hong Kongers with easier visa routes and a Huawei ban in 2020. Concerns about the Uyghurs in Xinjiang were raised in Parliament, but perhaps the most damaging incident was this. In 2022, Hong Kong protesters gathered outside the Chinese consulate in Manchester. Consulate staff, including the consulate general, then went outside the gate of the consulate in protective gear and dragged a Chinese man inside, proceeding to beat him up. British police had to cross the diplomatic line to enter and rescue him, which was a massive red line for Beijing. The British Foreign Office requested China to waive the diplomatic immunity for those 6 individuals to be interviewed by the police, but China refused and recalled them, granting them escape from British justice. In another shocking incident, reports in 2022 and 23 exposed overseas police stations run by China in the UK. 2 in London and 1 in Glasgow. Publicly, it was said to assist Chinese citizens with administrative tasks and documentation. However, they were revealed to be monitoring the Chinese diaspora and to blackmail dissidents and fugitives to return to China, threatening their families. Working with these police stations, solicitor Christine Lee was accused of interfering in UK politics on behalf of China, including donating over £500,000 to Labour MP Barry Gardiner. More recently, activists Carmen Lau and Ted Hui were targeted with sexually explicit AI images as a form of blackmail. The Chinese even tried to send letters to their neighbours falsely advertising them as prostitutes. Them and other Chinese activists like Tony Chung and Chung Kim-hwa have been harassed and had their families harassed and questioned. There have even been bounties and rewards for information or captures, such as Carmen Lau's neighbours receiving letters offering a reward of £95,000 for turning her in, or almost $130,000. To the Chinese embassy. Now we're in an age where Starmer and the Labour Party are desperate to find investment, especially as Trump is lashing out and destroying every relationship the US has made in the last century. Video on that coming very soon. So Starmer took risky moves such as approving China's application even though it was a near identical application that was submitted just 11 weeks prior, which was rejected. The only difference was, 11 weeks prior, the Conservatives had been empowered to reject the application. Whilst there has been some opposition such as Tower Hamlets Council voting to reject it by 51-0 completely unanimously, as well as residents and the Metropolitan Police objecting to it, the plans had already been called by the government, which meant that it was in their hands now, as if it was a matter of national security. Whilst they couldn't reject the plans, activists symbolically named the streets Tiananmen Square and Uyghur Court around the embassy. Whilst the police did walk back their objections, it was later claimed that this reversal was due to pressure from the Home Office and Foreign Office, politicizing the security assessment. A senior US official has expressed concern due to compromise of the Five Eyes data, including the Trump administration warning the risk to the US financial services firms and insurers using London IXP. Even former advisor to the Prime Minister Dominic Cummings claims that MI5 and MI6 warned him in 2020 that China was trying to build a spy center underneath the embassy. The mega embassy represents the ability for China to increase surveillance to bring in more resources for monitoring and censorship on British soil. It can potentially spoil the Five Eyes relationship, which has been so central to Anglo-American intelligence sharing. And I am by no means saying that America is not the worst country in the world on human rights, but they built a fortress for defense, whereas China is 100% doing this for surveillance on British soil. We will regret this. The residents of the Royal Mint Court are filing a judicial review on these grounds, but it is unlikely it'll go through. MI5 has claimed the risk is manageable, but we're not sure how true that really is. Keir Starmer has already approved the embassy, so once the keys are handed over, that's it. We can't place any more safeguards. No more cameras or security. The Royal Mint Court becomes de facto Chinese territory. This is a move that may well be remembered as the definitive symbol of British vulnerability in the post-globalization era. A Chinese Trojan horse welcomed through the gates of the city, right underneath our noses, just because we were weak and vulnerable enough to not have a choice in the matter, even though we knew all about it.